California Democrats are launching an investigation into how oil companies are abusing a historic situation to suck profits from Californians' wallets, with plans to question oil CEOs, regulators, and economists to find out why California's gas prices are the highest in the country. Meanwhile, President Biden says he expects to make a final decision about a federal gas tax holiday by the end of this week.
Americans are, of course, looking for some relief as more and more experts predict a recession on the horizon. When pressed about the possibility of a recession, Biden fired back at a reporter for sounding like a Republican politician. Let's watch.
They're saying the recession's even more likely than ever.
Not the majority of them are saying that. Come on, don't make things up, okay? Now you sound like a Republican politician. I'm joking. That was a joke. But all kidding aside, no, I don't think it is. I was talking to Larry Summers this morning, and there's nothing inevitable about a recession. Here's I think we're going to be able to do.
It's a really relaxing backdrop. I want to go to the beach.
You know, what it's not relaxing is the idea that he's talking to Larry Summers, who many people, blame for the poor handling of the last recession. He is one of those comic figures that just won't go away in terms of Democratic advisors. And the idea that there's nothing inevitable about a recession when Joe Biden was the vice president through heralding, the country through the last recession is kind of a strange take. Now, Larry Summers did come out recently with a proposal that many on the left were surprised wasn't so bad. It's a departure from the let's just depress wages approach that's been circulating of late. The belief that you just have to, you're going to address demand by making sure workers don't have enough money, I guess, to feed themselves and buy the basic things that they need to survive.
Well, but isn't with the California prices being so high, I know people are always concerned about price gouging, but isn't this kind of like a simple economic thing whereby, look, there would be shortages, so they raise the price, so then so instead of the long lines down the block for gas, the price goes up, and then some people say, well, I guess I don't really need to fill up. I'll drive less, or I'll get to work some other way. It's inconvenient for them, obviously, but then there's just that many people in line for gas. So if the price was lower, then you would just have shortage. There wouldn't be enough gas for everybody.
Well, the problem with
that's the basic economic reason for price gouging during.
Well, the problem with that, and I think the problem with a lot of economic models, is that it presumes that willingness to pay equals ability to pay. But the reality is that there are some people who can make different decisions and take a train to work, et cetera, and there are people who absolutely cannot. And the people who cannot do anything but drive to work aren't necessarily the people who can afford to pay more for gas. So it's a really imprecise tool that ends up disproportionately hurting people who are already, I would argue, disproportionately
Absolutely,
vulnerable.
but I'm saying that the reason for the prices going up isn't just like pure unbridled greed. It's to induce some people to stay away from the pumps because there's not enough oil for everyone who is trying to get it at that moment. Just like this, same with anything during an economic collapse or crisis.
I mean, right? I'd argue that's a little bit of an overly optimistic.
It's like they raised the price. They used to with Ubers or ride shares or taxis, right? They raised the price, maybe not taxis because they're so aggressively regulated, but there's not enough for everybody. So then the price of it goes up. So then either more drivers come out because now you can make more money, or people say, well, I'll walk. So now there's like at that price that you just cannot meet the demand.
I feel like you're just describing price gouging.
I am describing. No, I'm explaining why price gouging is produced by like just basic economic reality, not like, we can really milk people here.
Yeah, I do think the argument about price gouging is that they're always attempting to figure out how they can extract the most from the population.
And also, if you artificially kept the price, if you force them to have lower prices, then there would be shortages. Well,
there's going to be shortages either way. If you're saying there's a limited supply of gas or a limited supply of Uber cars or whatever it is, the issue isn't that there's going to magically become more of the limited quantity just because you bring up the price. It's just who gets to access that limited quantity and what you're saying is the richer people should be the ones that have the access.
The people who can actually pay.
And what other folks are saying is that there are people who really need to get to work who can't absorb those costs as well. And as our society depends on them being able, whether they're truckers or what have you, to get things across the country, to deliver goods, to get to work, to be part of the service industry, whatever it is. And that we should be attending to that and not just make sure that some millionaire in their helicopter is the person who gets to fly to Burbank because they're the ones that can afford gas. But CNN's Dana Bash pressed Biden's Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, on why the administration isn't taking quicker action on providing relief to Americans. Here's what she had to say.
Why hasn't that happened yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the tools. First and foremost, we want to increase supply. We also want to take a look at consumer relief directly.
Right,
and
but
that is
18 cents per
18
gallon.
cents?
That's a lot when you add it up. So why not do it now?
It is, and it's certainly one of the things the president is evaluating. I know this is what's been happening in many states as well. Honestly, the whole array of tools are still being pressed. He's used the biggest tool that he has, but he's obviously very concerned about this continued upward pressure on prices.
What's he waiting for on the gas tax?
Well, I mean, part of the challenge with the gas tax, of course, is that it funds the roads, and we just did a big infrastructure bill to help fund the roads. So if we remove the gas tax, that takes away the funding that was just passed by Congress to be able to do that. So, that's one of the challenges, but I'm not saying that that's off the table. That is, as prices continue to rise, that's certainly something the administration is considering, just like I know governors across the country are considering that.
The administration is currently releasing 1 million barrels a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which could give oil and gas companies a chance to replenish their stock at much higher prices.
The president remained positive about the situation, however, and declared that this is the time to move toward renewable energy.
Same time, my dear mother used to have an expression, out of everything lousy, something good will happen if you look hard enough for it. We have a chance here to make a fundamental turn toward renewable energy, electric vehicles, and not just electric vehicles, but across the board. And that's something we should be. My team is going to be sitting down with the CEOs of the major oil companies this week and try to get an explanation how they justify making $35 billion in the first quarter.
Are you planning to sit down with oil and gas CEOs,
No.
Mr. President? Why is that, sir?
Because my team's going to do that.
It is very frustrating to hear Joe Biden, who completely threw renewables and climate change, Green New Deal interest under the bus earlier in his presidency, decide to trot this out now at a time when it's not necessarily responsive to this crisis and kind of becomes a piñata for the right to whack at. I think rightly pointing out that the kind of Green New Deal infrastructure that we do need, and which is obviously necessary for climate change reasons and like the survival of the species, is not going to solve this crisis that he's facing before midterms. And it's setting up policies that are much needed for criticism when he completely was Mr. Oil and Gas, Mr. Fracking, Mr. all of those things, a year ago.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And our foreign policy is contributing to this. I mean, I keep hitting this note over and over again, but that's the thing we could do differently. Correct. You're right. Getting the renewable stuff, that's a long-term solution. Even trying to drill more, trying to have more gas permit, that would be a midterm solution. The short-term solution is to fix this conflict to a much greater degree, and that would provide some relief and would result in people not dying anymore.
Yeah.
Like, work on that. That foreign policy is a very clear jurisdiction of our federal government. I mean, some of this other stuff is supply chain issues and market problems, complicated thing as a result of the pandemic. The area of this that is most directly responsive to where government policy is the main thing. These are governments fighting with the Ukrainian government and the Russian government, our government imposing sanctions and policy. This is the main government thing to do, is to work on this.
Right. And I also think it's really dishonest, I got to say, for Jennifer Granholm to be pretending
My old governor.
There's
the governor of Michigan when I lived there.
Well, let her know when
I'll let her know.
when you write your next letter to your former governor that the pretending like funding of the American government works the same as your checkbook is one of the biggest misrepresentations that the right ever spun. The idea that they have to collect the gas tax or else they can't pay for infrastructure is absolutely absurd. When you pay taxes, when you file in April, those taxes disappear on a computer sheet and the American government prints new money to fund all of its programs. It's not like it goes into some bank earmarked specifically, this is the percentage of Robby's taxes that are going to roads and bridges. That's just not how it works. And so you're seeing now in real time how both parties do this. They misrepresent the funding streams in order to come up with justifications why they're not taking certain policy making certain policy maneuvers. And you saw the kind of sideways look in her eye. It suggests to me that there's some other political considerations that are going on, whether or not it's the juice is worth the squeeze for him to do a gas tax, what kind of pushback he's going to get from conservatives, that this is maybe floated as a trial balloon and they're taking in information about how it's going to go down, but pretending that this is like a tax and spend issue is really dishonest.
Well, okay, but I think a right-leaning economist would say of course you can do that to some degree, but just printing more and more money without having any basis in reality for how you're covering these debts does devalue the currency, leads to inflation.
The concern is inflation.
And inflation, yeah.
We should have some economists coming on to talk about what actually does cause inflation. What we're learning now is there's a lot of uncertainty about what that is. But my understanding and what MMT economists say is that it has to do with whether or not it's actually being spent into the economy versus sitting in rich people's bank accounts. And that's ultimately what the issue is in a very simplified way. But Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is ratcheting up his fight with the White House over the FDA over child vaccines. This as he weighs in on whether he will participate in 2024. We'll discuss that next with our panel.